This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hey guys, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series. So we had a really beautiful conversation, like a beautiful men's conversation in this episode with Alex Holmes. Sorry, I know him as Alex Reads often. Who is a mental health advocate and podcaster. He has a podcast which is like in the top 50, I think, on GQ's top 50 podcast for 2020. His podcast was featured by Apple as one of the top podcasts to listen to about mental health. So he's a real knowledgeable man in this area. And he's also a journalist and a writer. So like he really writes and really lives the kind of masculinity and mental health. And we sit down and we talked about emotional resiliency, really, and like what that means, how that affects us as men, what it means to be, what does it mean to be masculine? What does masculinities mean? We kind of delve into all these topics. A really beautiful, wholehearted conversation from three men. I think it's not something, I was just left with this really beautiful and warm feeling afterwards, just feeling like, I need more conversations like this in my life.
Yeah, it really was something that was close to my heart as well. This idea of emotional resiliency and what it takes to learn and understand, and how you really think and feel, so that you can approach life and interact with the myriad of chaos and good things and good times and bad times that occur in life, and feel that your feet are still on the ground. And it's been such a huge journey for me. So I really love this episode and the conversation we have. And I love how the conversation unfolds as well. You guys are in for a real treat.
We really just like, the conversation just moves very, when people talk about organic conversation, this is a very organic conversation because, we had ideas and plans at the beginning about where the conversation would go, and it didn't go there or in the order we were expecting it to. It just went on its own route. I think there's some real interesting conversation about science and how we see science today. And we kind of get into some of the masculine and feminine dynamics as well, and how they affect us and in the world we're in today, which I think is also really interesting part that we touch upon.
Yeah, and I mean, it is all around like the idea of like masculinity, or as Alex says, masculinities, and what it is to be a man. Today, yesterday, tomorrow. What it is to actually call yourself a man and feel at home in your own masculinity. So, yeah, really hot topic.
Yeah, you're in for a good one there. And, other announcements, we still, we've got one spot left actually for another coaching client, because we don't want to take on too many people, so we not be able to serve people wholeheartedly and fully. So we've got one spot left. So if you're a regular listener to our podcast, then you'll know the sort of work that we do. And if you're new here, these are sorts of conversations that we love to have. We have with our coaching clients, and yeah, it's about, deepening your understanding of your own emotions, which as a byproduct deepens your understanding of the emotions of the women that you meet, because I think it's often said like, oh, as men, we, feel more, it's good to feel more, but you're thinking, oh, why would I bother? But actually, if you've been in relationships, you've had conflict, you've had disagreements, you've had resentments, and your relationships don't go in the way you want, one of the big reasons is because you're not able to sit with your own emotion and also the emotion of your partner to connect with them more deeply. And when you're able to do that, these sorts of conflicts, they might arise, but the ability to kind of deal with them and communicate through them just is just so much easier. And this is like the deep work that we do with the guys that come to us, as well as, as a byproduct almost, is the dating work we also do.
Boom. So yeah, get in touch, and we look forward to speaking to you.
Great. Well, without further ado,
let's get into the episode.
Hello, guys and girls. We are back with another wonderful episode, and it's been a while. It feels like we've got a wonderful guest. We've got Alex from Time to Talk, a podcast which I love listening to. He's also a writer. He writes about all things kind of positive masculinities, and you heard me correctly, plural there, mental health and self-awareness. And he's an incredible character, a wonderful writer, and he's also been featured in the GQ for his writing, and also his podcast has been featured in GQ's top podcast for 2020. Hello, Alex.
Hello, guys. Lovely to be here. I've got this really weird thing in my throat. One sec. Hey, guys. Lovely to be here. Amazing.
Wonderful. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm doing all right. I am feeling good. Um, like a bit energized. It's coming to the end of the day now. Obviously, this evening, but yeah, energized. Had quite a productive day. Um, yeah, I'm in a good space.
Good, good. AJ, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for asking. yeah, yeah,
Good.
yeah. No, I'm good. Yeah. I feel good. Just midweek. Was it? Getting these things in. So yeah, I feel strong.
Yeah, yeah. So today we're going to talk about building emotional resiliency because we feel like, especially at the moment with what's going on in the world, like constant change, constant flex, um, that you're having to be emotionally nimble. Is the phrase I put to myself. Is like, you never know what's going to fly at you at any given day, any given time. It could be birds. It could be new lockdown rules. Who knows? It could be a change of government. You just don't know what's going to come each day. It's like I read the news and sometimes I read it and just go, oh, okay, it's very normal today, the news. Nothing spectacularly strange happened, there was no protest anywhere today. It's like, but it's like we're having to process all these things emotionally, but also in kind of day-to-day life, like your work life's probably changed. If you're in a relationship, your relationships, the dynamic of relationships probably changed. And if you're not in a relationship and you're trying to date, then the whole kind of structure of dating, the fundamentals of some of the dating have changed, and this is having an emotional bearing on you. And if you're not potentially processing those emotions or dealing with them, then you're probably feeling some sort of hurt or pain or struggling in some way. So I thought it'd be great for us to talk about what emotional resiliency is and how, as men especially, we can become more emotionally resilient. Always feel like women are schooled in how to be emotionally resilient. They taught from a young age how to talk about how they're feeling, or even the simple thing of from a young age, girls crying is just an acceptable thing, right? We can talk about this men crying, boys crying especially, but like even young girls are told, oh, you're crying, it's like it's okay, keep cry until you're finished, like feel what you're feeling. Whereas I think as men, we're told to do very much the opposite. We suck it up, stop, don't do that. And I think that really affects us emotionally throughout our lives and our ability to process and express our emotions. So where should we start? Maybe we think about how would you guys, it'd be good to speak to everyone and see what we think. Is like, how would we define emotional resiliency?
Am I going first or
Go
okay?
on, you go.
Emotional resiliency. I would look at emotional resiliency as something that is, it's difficult to say, because when we think of resilient, we think of coming up against an obstacle, right? And I would look at it as just saying, being 100% aware of your emotions, and then kind of finding the right ways to channel them into something that isn't harmful for the next person or for the environment around you, which is why I focus on the positive side of masculinity. But when emotion is channeled into creativity and into things that can kind of like move, like change stuff and move things into and move your energy into different space, then that's an important aspect of emotional resilience, because it means that you're having the courage to really confront whatever the emotion is that is there, without actually kind of tapping into, say, fear, which will then encourage you to then protect something, or to kind of exhibit frightenness through that emotion, which is typically represented through anger and other things. But yeah, like, emotional resiliency is just, I guess it's just really just trying to be, well, to me, it's really just trying to be as self-aware as possible, and really be and understand where the emotion is coming from, and again, trying to articulate what the emotion is that you're feeling too. I don't know if that's to say if that kind of rings home for you guys or anybody that's listening. at all. What do you think?
Yeah, AJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the thing that jumped out to me, is, especially as Alex was talking about it, was around the awareness. I mean, I'm thinking about it from a man's point of view, my point of view, and the importance of awareness of my emotions, such that when they come up, I'm able to tango with them. I'm able to understand what they're about, and express them, and allow them to express themselves. Actually, to allow my emotions to come up and express themselves, and such that I can interpret them in a way that doesn't involve me losing my shit. It doesn't involve me going off the path. I actually looked up the definition of emotional resilience, and I mean, essentially, what it boiled down to was one's ability to adapt to stressful situations or crisis. The more resilient people are able to roll with the punches and adapt to adversity without lasting difficulties. So there's this idea of the dichotomy of the two. It's like to be able to experience difficulties, emotional experience, difficult emotional experiences, without the negative impact of them, without them then turning into something that's out of control, or where we lose control or cause harm. So yeah, I think like in my life, and especially like the way you introduce this podcast with everything that's going on right now, it's been vital and golden for me to be able to acknowledge that I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling stuck, or I'm feeling scared, and then be able to sit with that emotion and allow itself to express it without feeling like I need to uh, squash that emotion in some way, whether it's through reaching for the bottle or for some vice. I'm able to go, right, okay, and also just being aware that there's a stimulus, an obvious, there's something going on, and it's causing me to feel a certain way, right? That's normal, that's okay, right? Like, what's going on?
What I really get from what both of you said is like, it's that self-awareness, that awareness of oneself and one's emotion and what's coming at one, at any given moment, whether that be having awareness of the fear and awareness to say, okay, I don't want to react out of fear in these instances. The thing that really comes to my mind, I really heard, was actually around being flexible, actually. And I was thinking, because when I always think of resilience, I think of resilient materials. And you often think of, like, I don't know, like a strong piece of plastic or something like that. We'd say, oh, that's resilient. But actually, like, it's strong. We'd often say strong, right? But I think of resiliency, and I also think of like flexibility and the ability to flex to different emotional situations, because there may be moments where one needs to be, maybe one needs to be strong and, deal with difficult emotions and, be able to process those. But I also think the flexibility to deal with maybe things like on the other end, to be said as being other end of the spectrum, like compassion and love, which may need like you to be flexible in a different way, to be maybe more gentle, more soft. That really is what kind of comes to mind, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, flexibility is just really interesting. It's really interesting you came to that as well, because it's it when we think about masculinity, we think of things that are quite rigid and inflexible. We don't look at it as something that is flexible or can be changed or moved. Everything has to be resolute. That is what it is. We've heard, there's kind of those age old conversations and ideas, be a man, stand up strong, be firm, X, Y, and Z, all those things, blind courage, all of that stuff. It's an inflexible understanding. But then that's kind of the stuff that comes up when we look at emotional resilience, because at the end of the day, when we are, running with blind courage, we're not even acknowledging all the other emotions that are there. Like, literally, we have to really understand there is fear, because naturally, if you're running into something that is dangerous, you're going to have the fear, the anxieties, all of that stuff. And it's not to say that we must lean on those things, because they're not necessarily good to dwell on, but it's about learning how to acknowledge those things and really understand what it is and what we're doing. And then really, and in the definition that Ahmad read out, it kind of like we look at it and we think to ourselves about the environment and the wider things that kind of happen when we decide to be inflexible. We have the world that we have today. So it's like, and there are things, and it's wider. If we look at every facet of community, it's wide, these things. So yeah, the flexibility was really interesting word to kind of apply to this at the same time. Yeah. People just need to start bent up and start literally just
and dance a little,
loosen up themselves with their emotions. You know what I mean? Like just really, just kind of like But yeah, it's a tricky situation.
I like what you said. What you said about masculinity actually is like it is very flexible. It's very black and white. It's always been taught as being very like this is, or as I quote, like I see this a lot. You might probably guys see on Instagram a lot. You'll see the phrase "a real man." ... And you see this kind of peppered around like it could be a real man looks after his children. A real man doesn't let other men look at his woman. A real man does X, Y, and Z. But actually, like that phrase, a real man, is actually quite destructive because it's like as soon as you say something is a real man does this, everything outside of that, no, you're basically making any man that identifies with things outside of that as invalid.
Yeah. Absolutely. Someone cries too much. Why are you crying to? And it's like literally what you said earlier about the whole, when it's about the education, about us really understanding what that is, right? And growing up and a part of the education of boys is that they aren't allowed to. They're allowed to be physically resilient. They're not allowed to really kind of get to grips with whatever it is, the emotion that they're feeling. It's told and taught to be a useless kind of pursuit, a trivial pursuit, in order to kind of just say, look, you shouldn't be doing that. Why are you crying, sort of thing? Like, why can't you cry? You're a human. We wouldn't cry if we weren't supposed to, So yeah, it's all of that down to the education, man. It's a lot of different things.
There was an interesting one I came across where it was like the only emotion that most men believe they're allowed to express is anger. And then so no matter what the emotion we really feel, whether it's fear, sadness, these sort of other emotions, we will always express it through anger. So then, but really we're sad about something, but we can't say that, so we'll be angry about it. We're scared of something, but we can't say that, so we'll be angry about it. And then there's generations of men who are just, that's it, that's the only thing that we can express. It is that sense that when we're young, I remember for myself must have been like early 20s or something, and a friend of mine said something about him crying, and my initial reaction was to scoff and laugh and say, "Ha, why are you crying?" But something in me twigged like there was something wrong, and then I went back and I apologized and I said, "Oh, you know what? I realized it's just something in me that I don't feel comfortable saying that." To which he then said, "Oh, why not? Like it's a normal thing. Like it's you should be very comfortable crying." And in that moment, that really, for me, it was just one of those moments that flipped on its head and made me consider that whole concept. And I like what you said was, which is something that I really kind of speak into a lot these days, is about humanness. It's like, why wouldn't you cry? You're a human being. We're all humans, and for as long as we're going to talk about masculine traits and feminine traits, we keep missing the point that we're actually all human beings having this experience of life, and humans inherently have emotions, and there's a range of them, and excitement is on one end and sadness and fear is on the other end. Instead of this whole thing of we're supposed to be this if you're that one, and if you have these particular pieces, you gotta be stoic and keep it together, and if you've got boobs and stuff, then you got to be emotional, and then it's like at some point we got a bit lost, I think, with this masculine and feminine, and we lost the humanness of it all.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
I often feel like, in a way, we live in this world of science, and we like to want to kind of place the world in, as Alex said earlier, is like rigid terms, like black or white, rich or poor, like, and science breeds us to be this thing is correct or incorrect.
Boxes. That's what they need us to be.
Yeah,
We need to be
that's
categorized.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, that's largely a masculine trait. That's largely a
yeah.
masculine a product of
Mm.
masculine thought. It needs to be this, that. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it means that we actually become inflexible. We don't want people to be flexing between boxes, like it's because it's inconvenient actually for other people to be dealing with. It's like I saw an Instagram post recently, and someone had asked something about men and women, and a guy had responded and said, "We live in a time," and I remember the words, "We live in a time of incredible snowflakery." And he was like, you can't even refer to people as men and women because there will be some people out there that will get offended and will want to describe them. They want to be, what did he say? He used a term, and I found it quite derogatory, actually, we were saying, because what it showed to me was one thing. And he basically was saying that, if I decide one day and I want to be referred to as a microwave, then everyone should respect my wishes and so forth. And I thought it was funny reading this because it was like, oh, you're trying to disguise your kind of opinion as you being somewhat flexible, but actually you're just portraying this trait of being deeply inflexible and very much like, I feel uncomfortable with anyone being outside of my norm boxes, So it makes me so uncomfortable, I just have to ridicule them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is such an interesting conversation, and I love talking about these things because it's just like it just makes me realize just how much fuckery we're in. Like I look at it and I'm just like, oh my god, like wow, that's just the straight up like bondage that we find ourselves in by virtue or curse of being men. Like I don't understand, like, and it's literally just learned behavior from our fathers, but then also the men around us, and then the men in wider society, and then the men typically in control of the societies that we live in. And yeah, it's super interesting. Yeah, revelationary. But I guess this is why we have conversations like this.
Yeah. I was going to say, next thing I really just wrote down, we think about emotional resilience, right? And men and emotional resilience. And the phrase vulnerability, like I know it's something that we all here have used as a term, and to describe sharing one's emotions and feelings and truth. And it almost goes against the term emotional resilience, doesn't it? Because if something is resilient, it's strong, it's flexible, it has strength. Something is vulnerable, then it is weak, and so forth. But I feel like I've come to feel that these things, in a way, are becoming closer. They are closer and closer together to me. Like someone who is, to me, is emotionally resilient is also comes with that willingness to be vulnerable. What do you guys think about that?
Ahmad?
Yeah, I was just looking it up because I know we've used this. I literally just jumped off a coaching call where we were discussing authenticity and the fundamentals of what it is. And one of the things we discuss in our coaching is about how authenticity really, the access to being authentic, because that's another word that people use a lot, is authenticity, right? But in terms of human expression, how one has access to being authentic is being vulnerable, which is something that we coined ages ago as being synonymous with super confidence. Is to be vulnerable, is you're completely vulnerable. And so for me it's like I learned a long time ago that you can take this right back to, I think a really good example would be, especially for guys, right back to like the school playground when boys would take the piss out of each other.
Mm.
And so back then, the rest of my face hadn't caught up with my nose, and my nose was huge. and so that would be the go-to thing that everyone would take the piss out of. I think, Dave, if you remember that back that far, there
I
was like
remember.
certain characters. I think Neil was one of them.
Wow.
Name and shame them.
Yeah,
You are
I didn't say his
dropping
surname,
names.
but yeah, he said Neil, innit? Just,
Drop the surname. Send the bad vibes to him.
Yeah.
Did he have an unfortunate surname, if I remember right?
I don't remember. Oh yeah, he did actually.
Okay, so the list
Yeah.
gets narrower.
So I think, but anyway, they all would. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing one day is I realized that I had an epiphany. I realized that if I just say it out first, I got a big nose. It's like, I exposed the weakness. I didn't wait for someone else to find it and call me out on it. I exposed it. All of a sudden, it disempowered their whole take on it.
Mm.
And I suppose that was the beginning of understanding like vulnerability to a degree, right? And so vulnerability to me is that really being able to expose all the way I see it now is your truth, whatever is true. And something else that I've come to understand as well through the work that David and I do, the podcast and our Instagram, is it's not enough to be vulnerable. It's actually a huge part of it is acceptance. And that's where I feel a piece that a lot of people go off the rails is they're being vulnerable and they're sharing, this is what's going on and I feel this way in my emotions, but they don't actually accept that they feel, and I think that's a huge bit that's missing for men is actually the acceptance of emotions. We can all sit and talk about we feel, but until you actually accept it, you're still going to feel like this is some sort of curse. Like, I don't want to feel this way. It's a taboo, right? So yeah, acceptance is huge. And we talk about this a lot on our podcast because we're talking about sexual preferences. We're talking about dating preferences. We're talking about lifestyle preferences, and we're coaching men in these areas. And the number one thing is, if you want to do something, you have to first accept that you want that lifestyle, that you want to live that way for yourself, right? That's not for anyone else. So for me, yeah, vulnerability is huge, and it's the way in which we describe what it takes to really be an authentic being and to be out there in the world. Because even more so now, as David was saying, right, you're going to have 1,000 people online that are going to disagree with you.
Yeah.
Whatever your choice is, right? Like, and we all experience this. We put things out into the internet, and then there's always someone that has something to say, has something to say, whether it's positive or negative, right? Yeah,
and that's where the resiliency comes in, doesn't it? Because you got to be able to say, like, well, said what I said, or this is it, It's funny what you said about acceptance, because a lot of men don't accept particular things with regards. So you will see men kind of deal with grief, for example, quite differently to women. There have been studies shown, and but as men grow older, the concept of their own mortality becomes much more present in them. When people die, that understanding and trying to accept that loss is very difficult, because what it does is it invokes all the emotions that you've been told that you shouldn't even have. And then you don't know how to process those emotions. When my nan passed away, she passed away in November last year, the process of grieving, because I had done a lot of work, I'd done a lot of kind of like understanding, feeling the emotion anyway, letting it all come, being like I was a mess in the hospital, like before a lot of people were, and it was like I was just shamelessly just there, kind of like really just like letting it all out. I was just vulnerable, as you say, whereas a lot of the men in my family were not as vulnerable in that sense, and if they were, they'd probably do it in private. But it becomes that process of really trying to understand yourself and understand how you're feeling about that. And a lot of men don't have the language to really articulate the emotions they have. So when it becomes when those things do happen, when these setbacks do happen, when there are losses, when there are breakups, when there are rejections, when there are embarrassments, when there are anxiety-inducing events and stuff, learning to accept the thing that has happened, and then kind of processing it healthily. That certain bits it just gets disrupted by stuff. So instead of like processing the loss and grieving, it's usually anger comes in, like why is it taken away from me? Should have done this, could have done that. You've just really just bypassed the actual grieving process. You have to grieve the fact that it's over, and we grieve a lot in our life.
Yeah.
We grieve the loss of friends. When I say loss, I don't mean like like life and death, but probably like the ending of friendships, the ending of relationships, the ending of jobs, certain careers, and leaving home, returning. You know what I mean? The grieving of a life that you had, and things and circumstances mean that you've changed, and they've come back, and you've had to come back to a place where you didn't really want to go to. All of this stuff feeds into emotional resilience, because you have to really understand and get to grips with where you are in order for you to then kind of make a process it, get used to the shit, and kind of like so you can kind of make way through and make your way out of it. But yeah, and as per my podcast talk, like those are the conversations we should be having, but again, I could like all of this is really just kind of overshadowed by shame anyway. So it's like, again, as I said earlier about putting ourselves in a bind, it just becomes so difficult sometimes to kind of step out of that shame, because shame protects you and keeps you within the confines of a community, of a group, of a people, of a sector or something. It's always when you become shameless that you leave those groups, and it's hard for you to then come back in if you want to go back in, or if you want to be around, because then now you're just like estranged. What happens then? So
Yeah, there's two things you said I really pick up on. And the first one is about grief of loss. Grieving of loss. This throat thing is everywhere with us. And it's something actually that really dawned on me, is that as often as men, we get very stuck in our overthinking of what we should have done better, what we could have done, what we should have done, or hanging on to the past. And it really speaks into what you said about kind of grieving. It's like, oh, actually, this thing has ended. It's coming to an end. You grieve the process. You look at it and go, it's sad that it's ended, but this is on to better things. But actually, a lot of men get stuck in that process of not actually doing the grieving and just keeping their, I'm going to use the word tentacles, like on to the past, grips on, holding into the past, like wishing of a past day, a former glory, actually. It's almost very similar to how we see kind of right-wing politics or nationalism. It's always that past day that was so wonderful that has left us, and now we're in this terrible position. And we go, oh, I wish it was like it was before. And it is that very much that process of not letting go, not grieving what's past and gone, and moving into what's new.
The inflexibility, change.
Yeah.
I think, and Dave put me onto this book, the Ways of the Superior Man, and of course it has its whatever. Like you have to really take it with a pinch of salt. You're familiar with the book, Ahmad?
I've heard of it. I've never actually read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. But the book is problematic. Let's just put it that way. To a certain extent, it was written in the 90s. It was written for a particular kind of men, etc. Like now that's out of the way. There's parts in there which talks about masculinity and femininity and whatnot. But when he talks about femininity, he talks about change. He talks about movement, like bringing life and also death at the same time, and doing all these different things. So I always find it interesting as you know, as we enter on this road of really trying to understand what masculinity is, and that's why I say masculinities, because masculinity isn't only something that is attributed to men, the same way femininity isn't only something that's attributed to women, you know. So yeah, and it's about, and I think like what has been a key thing that I've learned so far from this conversation is the understanding of change. Like, we don't handle change well, don't, and that's the stuff that throws us into utter despair. And it's just like, well, why can't we handle change? Because we've never been allowed to feel a change, and so when it's outside of our control, we just don't compute that things can be outside of our control.
Yeah, that sense of chaos we don't handle very well. It's like the need to always control. And so we pursue our lives in such a way that we have a handle on things. I was thinking about this even today. It's the sense of, it's been said before, like in other areas where men don't like to admit that they don't know. It's like, I don't know is one of the most heinous crimes you can commit as a man, to openly admit that you don't know something.
Absolutely.
But then that is in itself keeps us stuck, because then we don't share about it. And then in addition to that, I think I can relate to that sentence myself in my life growing up, thinking everyone around me seems to know what they're doing. I don't. So I just keep stum and look like I know what I'm doing. And then, maybe they'll accept me into their group of the men that know. And one day I will know and walk with my head held high.
And it's bizarre. Slight tangent. I don't want to kind of derail the conversation, but I was reading this book called Why Visit America by a brilliant writer called Matthew Baker, American man, and there's a story within it, and it's basically the collection is a collection of short stories set around different parts of America, different states in America, in these kind of like Black Mirror-esque alternative realities about what kind of like what America, kind of where America is going at the most extreme on every level. This one story, I've completely forgotten the name of it, but this one story is about what happens when when the men die off, and then like, like a lot of men kind of like just their birth rates just kind of like the birth rates of men just depleted, like it just evolutionarily, like women and girls were populous, and it was a very interesting conversation around the things that have contributed to societal kind of understanding around masculinities, and kind of like what we kind of take as normal, but then when it's taken away from us and things change, it's like, oh my god, this like, this was holding us into this sort of bondage and whatnot. And I was just saying, it's a very interesting story. I'll find the story and I'll let you guys, I'll try and get it to you guys somehow, or I send you like a link to something. But yeah, it was a really interesting look at what happens when there are like, and I think in this thing there's like 10,000 men on the planet.
Wow.
So it was like 10,000. So it was a really interesting kind of look as to what makes a man, the input men have had in the world and whatnot. And I think something triggered me to say this, but there was a quote in it, and it was like, there was a man who was reading something, and he was like, there were all these architectures, and all of them were built by men, and there were hardly any female architects of note and of high standard. Like all the buildings we see, the churches built, the buildings, all of the great works of art, all of that's like when I say art, architecture in that sense, by men. And then the woman in the story was like, well, hopefully that'll never be the case ever again. And it was like, and it just, that really kind of got me, because I was like, when I look around at the built environment, and the built environment is masculine too. And I'm like, this is just not like, this is strange. Like, and I'm just, don't know why it triggered me to say that, but I just find it just strange.
Well, I think it's a relevant point there. Like, there was something that crossed my mind earlier, and I didn't say it, but it comes again now, and it's like this idea that our consensual reality, as the world as it is today, it seems to me to be quite toxic masculine in the way that it's driven, like up until the end of 2019. Like, I mean, until everything switched in 2020, like literally Amazon was on overdrive. People are just having stuff delivered constantly, and just doesn't matter about waste. And we just kept going, and there was no end in sight of this consumerism. And things took a bit of a break during lockdown here in the UK, and we saw a different existence.
Change.
We saw birds come back and flying in, and wildlife and nature. We just saw nature, really, rather than just man and creation. And I think there is something around because it's something we haven't touched upon at the moment yet, is this concept of masculine and feminine in each of us. And that was a big revelation for me. It was like, because I'd known my whole life, but I didn't have a context for it. And it was like, of course, there's masculine traits and then there's feminine traits, and we all have a mixture. And so this, I think, is something that requires more balance in the world and how we do things. And it's not been we're essentially talking about that here, right? We're talking about, in terms of emotional resiliency, is actually men putting more attention on the feminine aspects, right? And not being women. Obviously, I think we have to always give this a proper context when we describe it, so people don't get it wrong. But when I say feminine, I'm talking about the feminine characteristics. I'm not saying woman characteristics, because you can also get masculine women, right? And I think this is something that's important. So you get feminine men and you get masculine women too, as much as you get masculine men and you get feminine women. So it's a really interesting thing, because I think that characteristic of masculine and feminine can also be seen in everything, right? Can be seen in the world at large. But for some reason, and I really feel, Dave, that you touched upon it earlier with science. Like, we've become, like, science itself is very masculine, and we've become so like, right, this is the only way, that nothing outside of it can exist. And that's a very masculine trait, very inflexible. Just a quick illustration of that is, I was talking to a physics professor who teaches physics at UCL, and he was saying that one of the other professors there, he was going up for tenure, and one of the other professors said that he should not be given tenure because his teaching methods are not in line with the aims of the college. And what that meant was, he was telling the students to question his authority. He was telling the students, don't believe what I'm saying, take what I'm saying, go out into the world and see if it rings true. Whereas others were saying, no, take what I'm saying and take it to be true. So you really see that that's actually already in the science. Science is no longer about theories. It's about, I said it, so it's right.
And that's the thing, and I've been listening to quite a few scientists of late, and I don't know whether it's just the scientists I listen to and the ones that are drawn to my ears, But there was a conversation, I've forgotten where it was. I have to link it or find something to send it to you guys. But it was like, I think something was happening. There was a conversation some way, and it was like, science is factual, that you just want this answer and that answer, right? And the response was, science is not factual. They theorize, and you try to see if that can be proved, and then you go from there to see if more can be found out and more can be discovered. So I feel like, in its natural form, science is neither feminine nor masculine. It's kind of people who have taken it and shaped it have created this energy around it to keep it as such, you know. So you've got the people up against this person that you're speaking about, saying, no, he's not in line with X, Y, and Z. No, he's not in line with X, Y, and Z. No, in this, that, and the other. And you will get that in nearly every industry, because when we look at it, at least 200 years old, a lot of these industries are. They're going to be inflexible. It's back to flexibility again, but it's going to be inflexible, you know. And that's why when we look at work cultures, it's so hard for things to break into a work culture, to change it. It's hard. All of these things are difficult because of the rigidity that we've been so used to seeing and having. And it protects certain people too.
And I think one of the things you said there about science is really interesting. Is like there's a few things always pop into my mind. Is that science is not free from fashion as well. I think it's something people often forget. Like often the prevailing social ideas and social thought also seep into science, because ultimately the way that science is funded is usually by governments, large organizations who are wanting to make money, and often because they want their ideas to be proved correct. And so it's not really free from the rigidity, actually. And in a way, science is meant to be an investigation.
Yeah.
You have a theory, but you should be quite detached from your theory. But actually what we're seeing is that people are highly attached to their theories and they want to prove them to be right in some way. Like I read an interesting Instagram post by a guy, I think his name's Cam Fraser, and he talks much about sex and men, actually. And he actually was talking about there's a lot of studies that have been done to say that it's good for men to ejaculate often, regularly, actually, is a phrase that's often used, right? And he said, and he actually cited 4 different studies. And he said, in this study, they found that 21 times was good for men. But in this other study, they found that there was no link between prostate health and ejaculation. Then in this study, they found another study that basically said there was no correlated benefit to ejaculating regularly. And in another study, they said there was a slight correlation. And he said, the thing is with these studies is whatever you decide to quote, you're going to quote whatever fits the narrative that you want to tell.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
What did someone say? There's lies, there's something, and then there's statistics or something. Like, literally, there's along those lines. Let me find the actual quote. But that's the thing. Like when it comes to that, like you could like find the statistics and be like, all right, let's mold it to what we want it to be.
When I was at university and we had a dissertation, you had to prove, or you had to give I studied computer science, and we had to show some research as to why we took certain decisions. And I was my computing skills was pretty basic, so I created a 2D graph instead of a 3D graph. And so I found some evidence to back why 2D graphs are better than 3D. And actually, I can tell you now to this day, it's because it's less information for the eyes to take in. Okay. So yeah, just keep that in mind next time.
The quote is there are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah.
So
isn't that a book?
Mark Twain.
Okay.
Mark Twain wrote it. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure it's a. I'm not sure it's necessarily him that created that order. So don't quote me on that, but you can find it in one of his books. So
I actually was, this was something I quoted. I didn't know it was from Mark Twain, but I quoted it early into this whole pandemic and lockdown because of the statistics, the statistical nature of things. There's a lot of statistics being thrown around, but not really good comprehension by most of us as to what these things actually mean. Even when people say like, oh, this is only 1% or whatever, what does that actually mean? Like, what is the damage? And until this day, none of us can really say, like, because it's such a moving
the statistics, fam. Like, no one cares. Like, ultimately, just, I mean, the statistics are good for like getting an idea or a map or something or some kind. But come on now, like, crime has gone up by 2% this year, and blah, 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 by 4%, and did it. it could have gone up by 1%, and all of a sudden it's 25% going up, and you're like, I mean, not to say that is, I'm not trying to make light of very serious things, but I'm also trying to make light of very serious things, because at the same time, you've got to really think to yourself, like, the nonsensicalness of this world in which we live in. It just baffles me more and more every day.
Absolutely.
Like, you'll have somebody, again, like what Dave said about, Cambraser's lady read those posts, and it was like about, ejaculation 21 times a day, and then some say X, Y, and Z and this, but then there's also like conversations around semen retention and abstinence and all those kind of things, and then they're supposed to be good for you as men to kind of, like, all this stuff. Nobody knows anything at all, and I just feel like until you find out, just like, until you really find out for yourself what you need to find out, just keep it pushing, like, share what you share, but nobody knows anything. And I think that's something that kind of boils back down to what you said about men don't like to not know. There has to be something that people know, or kind of,
certainty, right? Like,
certainty.
we want that. We want that sense of, it's absolutely, like, that's how I feel, right? There's absolutely, it's absolute chaos, madness, whatever this existence is, and then we're trying to stick a stake in the soil somewhere and say, okay, we can be certain about this one thing. It's orientation is another way of looking at it. Like, gives us some sense of who we are, what we're about, what we're up to, and where we're going. But in reality, we're just floating around in space.
Yeah. to be absolutely honest. To be honest. So COVID is feminine energy, yeah? Is what we were saying.
I'm not sure. I don't think that's what was said.
No, I thought I was just like swerve. That's why I swerved the conversation.
Statistically speaking,
we don't know. But on a serious note, that it really came and disrupted everything, and we have to. And this is when it first came, I really thought, like, I was like, this is interesting. It's disrupted the economic structures of everybody, of most of the world. It's disrupted our way of living. We've still seen births, but we've seen loads of deaths. We've seen people become more creative with regards to their work and what they do. Like, for example, the very fact that we're recording the podcast, the way we're recording it, is that, things have become available to us. Ideas have become available to us. Things have been created, and that very much is like a feminine direction in the way that we energize. So, it's very. This is just me in my head. This is me hypothesizing and just kind of like throwing that out there. But I think that's something to be aware of in these conversations with masculinity and how we look at it, and it's just looking at it being wider than us, being very much wider than us.
Because we exist in a world that's like only so much we can really comprehend, and it's like we often want to comprehend. We want to make sense of things that are too big for us to make sense of. It's like us trying to make sense of a global pandemic, as us with our small little brains. That's why we leap to decisions and choices and theories, because we're like, it needs to make sense. We can't sit with this idea that there's this thing happening and I don't have a fucking clue what's going on, eh? And a lot of people, if you said that's really what's true, it's too much for them to really grapple with, to really go, do you know what? I don't fucking know. And every day I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to have to work something else out, because otherwise, but the other choice for a lot of people is like, I need to find certainty in something, however ridiculous it is. But once I have decided upon that certainty, I will rigidly just like go, no, this is how it is. And I will argue it to my dying day. I'm waiting for the day where there's protests. Like, I think I was in Vietnam quite a few years ago, and there was some protests around the Vietnam War, and there's a man there, a monk actually, that set himself alight. I never remember his name. And I remember reading a book, and it described how he did it. He got a match. He was sitting in what is now Ho Chi Minh City, and he lit a match off the ground. Someone had poured gasoline on him. He lit a match off the ground and threw it on top of him. And there's only a few pictures of this happening because there wasn't a huge press presence there. And you think like this man's conviction of belief in what he was doing was so strong, he was able to set himself alight and stay there perfectly still. He didn't
Wow.
move. No scream, nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and you think people here, we are protesting over some small restrictions that mean that pubs close at 10 o'clock. And you think to yourself, you know,
Yeah.
does that really, in the grand scheme of our lives, of what's really happening to us, like the pub closing at 10 o'clock is really not the worst thing that's happening in the world at the moment, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the one thing that we can grapple on with certainty and then channel our emotion, which is often, as you said, anger into the thing.
Yeah. Anger has its uses, most definitely. Taking one step back, I just want to say that with regards to what you said about that, did you say he was a monk?
Yeah.
I think there's a conversation to be had around, the balances of the masculine and the feminine. Like, obviously, we're not saying, like, to say that masculinity is all bad because it's all rigid, and femininity, and you know what I mean, and all that stuff. I think they work together so well. I think in the book, in that book where we're talking about the way of superior man, I think he defines it as the riverbank is masculinity and the river is femininity, or feminine energy, or masculine energy, or however he phrased it. And I just thought that was a really interesting image to have, to kind of like to see, like, one gets guided to a destination where it can then flourish and do the best that it possibly wants to do. No sea can exist without the bank or the bed, all these other things. So I feel like all that stuff, but then it's like finding that balance of like kind of be understanding that we don't know, but then being open to a change when it happens to help us get to the place where we need to know what we need to know. And I think it all starts with ourselves and figuring out who we are and why we feel this way and why we react this way and what we are feeling and kind of the impacts we have on other people. And I feel like that is kind of where we need to get to, just as a collective society, in general, just really understanding that. And
it's like putting that energy to, I keep saying it to people, it's like, we have emotional reactions to things, but you have no real understanding why you're reacting in that way. And you negate the reason. It's like, I get angry when I go outside and it's raining, and I say, it's because of the rain, that's why I'm angry. But it's like, no, I'm not angry because of the rain. It's like, what does this rain mean to me? What does it mean about what I can do, what I can't do, who I am, my ability to perform, my ability to create, my ability to love?
acceptance.
And and they start going, it's like, actually, it's raining, I'm angry because I think it means that I can't go outside. And it's like, and then inquiring into that is something we don't do so much. It's like inquiring in and go, but is that true? Is that really true for me? Just because it's raining, does it mean I can't do certain things? Well, actually, no. And it's like, where did that story come from as well? It's an investigation, isn't it? It's like a backwards investigation, because you often get to this belief or idea that you hold about the world that is true, or you hold about yourself that is true. And I think, as part of the next question I was going to have around like how we build emotional resilience, especially as men, is like actually taking the time to take that investigation and start going like, why am I feeling this way? And not just because of the superficial thing that's come up. It's like there's a deeper rooted reason, there's a deeper rooted understanding and learning that be gained from doing a task that you could say is quite masculine, is investigating, trying to understand and trying to know and trying to learn.
How is always hard to identify, just because everybody's journey is different, I guess. And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think on a mental health note, I think that any form of it, like any issues emotionally, a therapist will definitely help with.
Yeah.
obviously finding the right therapist is key, because not all therapists are good for you, because they are people too, and the methods are different in several ones. But therapy helps the emotional, and therapy helps the kind of the emotional understanding of yourself and where certain things are coming from. In some cases, failing that, a coach. The idea is being able to reach out to outside of yourself into others, to be able to then find what you need to support you with certain things. Because then further than coaches, your friends and your family, but it's also, but the idea is communicating what you need with these people. Yeah, my own personal methods. So outside of therapy is just pretty much to journal and get thoughts out and get emotions out and really try to clarify what I'm feeling and why. But my personality is that way inclined. Not everybody has the outlet creatively that way. So whether that outlet for you is to say, all right, I want to go and do physical activity to kind of give my body that kind of like reinvigoration and really try to clear my mind in that sense. Whether that be I'm going to paint, or I'm going to join a new class or something, you know what I mean, or book club, or I don't know. But it varies from person to person. But it's also just about taking the step out of yourself to kind of really do something different and something new. And the key thing is to do something different and new, because that then will then reveal a different part of yourself to you. And that's an important facet and element.
I really feel that, like getting outside of someone's getting outside of your own mind. It's like, often it's said, it's like you can't fix a problem with the mind that created the problem. And I think I think to a degree that is very true. It's like seeking outside of yourself and having that reflected back to you. I find that's when you say a therapist and coach, two things. I currently have a therapist and I've had many coaches over the years, is like sometimes just having someone listen to you and they don't even give their perspective. They just simply listen to what you say and they give you a different angle, because they're like, this is what I hear. Because often what we tell ourselves and what we hear ourselves is the same loop, the same pattern that keeps looping round. And then you speak it to someone else and they say it back to you in a way, and it makes you realize that actually it's not exactly how you'd always seen it. Whatever that turmoil or emotion may be. And I have to agree, like for me, physical exercise is a big thing for me, actually. Like I find that really helps me emotionally, is to move my body. I also find that meditation is really good for me, just to create a level of separation between the emotion and myself, and they don't become so entangled. Because I think that's something that we get into. We get into like emotional entanglement with ourselves. It's
not an entanglement. No.
It's like we just think, oh, this is all, this is us, this is everything and who I am. We don't realize this is just something we're experiencing.
I think what comes up is like a framework that I've come to understand, which I suppose would be, you could use different methods to do this, but the first one would definitely be awareness of emotions. I think for a lot of men, that's the thing that we lack to begin with, is just the awareness that we're actually experiencing something. For example, grief is a big one, that if we don't want to deal with it, or we believe we're supposed to be a certain way, then we start to act in accordance with how we think we're supposed to be, as opposed to actually just accepting it. This is now a time for grieving. So there's the awareness, and then there's the acceptance. And I would put together acceptance and surrender. And surrender is a big step. But acceptance is accepting that I have something that I need to deal with. Surrendering is like, this is it. This is just how it is. And then the final thing would be around being in a position where I could express and talk about it. But what underlies all of this, and which I think is interesting, and it popped into my mind earlier again, is that a lot of this stuff is really about being present It's about getting back into the world, and how often these emotions, when our mind doesn't understand it or seeks to suppress it, it starts to try and figure it out and give us some context reason as to why are we having this, what are we doing with this, like what is this about, what is this feeling, what is this good, is this bad? And then again, it takes us away from the present moment. And I think that's actually something where in life, when you can really be present, um, that's a beauty, right? That's something that I think we all try to, like all of us here, and a lot of people are trying to get to this point where actually we're present to life. We're not living in our head about how things are or how things should be, and we're actually like, okay, this is it. This is life. I am sad right now, or I am happy right now, and this is the moment.
Don't get me wrong. I have moments where I am definitely not present, and I am all over the place emotionally, and I am a wreck. And I'm simultaneously a mess and trying to get myself together and doing all this stuff, but trying to be present here and trying to be, I'm thinking 10 days ahead and not thinking about the next hour and all of that stuff. It's about really figuring out how you ground yourself, and grounding yourself is very important in a way, like in the present, to say, okay, so I'm here. And I just said, look, like, I just look at my calendar daily. I don't look at the next, unless somebody asks me, oh, can I do something in a few weeks or whatever, then I'll check the calendar in a few weeks to see. But I try to just do things daily, because I can't, if I start to look further than the time I'm in, it all becomes overwhelming. And it's just like, it doesn't mean I don't plan, because I do, I'm a planner. But it just boils back down to what you said about being present and being in the moment and being in the space, and just really trying to understand that, like, now is really the only time we have. We've not got the past, because it's done and it's not there anymore. We're just lingering in with the memory. We're not in the future yet, because our minds are just moving there, but we're not there yet. We never know what any result's going to be. The only time literally is now. So it's like, doesn't mean you have to be impulsive or impetuous or anything. It just literally just means, just again, that back down to acceptance and back down to all these things. Just literally understand that we are here having this conversation, or we are here doing what we are doing, and just really appreciating that and really understanding that as a process.
A key word there actually is something that I've been thinking a lot, especially with just life in general, right? Because it's more than the Corona and COVID and stuff. Is life in general is grounding, and what I've learned over time is what works for me in that regard, and I think that's really important in life, day to day. I find it's something that I like to do in the morning. I like to ground myself in the morning after getting up. I don't know what happens at night, but I seem to leave the planet to come back, to ground back into this reality. But also, if I'm overwhelmed or stressed out, like you're saying, like, yeah, I need some time to think. Walking is just one of those phenomenal things. But if I don't have awareness, then I'm just stuck in that whirlwind of it, and then going round and round until I actually go, oh, hang on a sec, there's something off. That's the thing. But yeah, grounding is so key to resilience, right? Like, it's so key to actually just bring myself back to this is the moment. There's a really nice sentiment that a mentor of mine often says, and she says, no matter how hard the day is, I always remind myself that I'll be going to bed at the end. I like that.
Love it.
Yeah.
The time I get into bed,
Yeah.
and I know that sleep is coming. It might not come. I have like high functioning anxiety, so I tend to be up within 3 hours anyway. I'm like, but that moment of getting into bed and sitting there and thinking, I'm in bed, I'm safe. Like, I am safe. Like, this is like the world. Like, no one bothering me for nothing. That is priceless. Invaluable experience. 100% recommend.
Yeah,
every time.
Yeah,
just got a visual of you doing that there.
Listen. Just don't,
holding them hands together.
don't message me. Don't nothing. I just want to put BoJack Horseman on. I just want to just go to bed. Like, oh my god. Don't mess with my sleep. Don't mess with it. It's not. Don't do it.
No, I really agreed with the sentiment shared.
Hmm.
But one of the things I try in the morning as well is like I have like meditation. I do some yoga as
Okay.
well, and it's actually just doing things that brings me now and try not to, I don't look at my I try not to look at my phone.
Yeah.
All my apps, well, none of my apps will open. I can only really go to a timer and
Love it.
meditation apps. That's all I can really get into.
Love it.
And I find that's a good way actually, because otherwise I start planning about what I need to do, what I need to think I need to do later, what I might have forgotten, because that starts getting into my mind. But when I can spend that hour and a half of the day of just being in the movement or being in my meditation, it really helps me just come back to now, really.
Yeah. That
Come back to now.
that's super important. I mean, I wake up and I do something called the morning pages. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-mm.
Julia Cameron has this book called The Artist's Way. I've had it on my shelf for like the longest time. My best friends got it for me years ago. And but one of the tools in there, it's like she does this kind of like 12-week program stuff. That's how she's put it down. But it's like and each morning she says to get up half an hour before you start your day and write 3 full pages of A4 of just all of the thoughts, everything. First thing that comes to your mind, just write it. It's a stream of consciousness. It's a way of unlocking kind of that creative energy. It's like if any habit or any course you're on, the first day is great. The second day, okay, I'm doing this. The third day, you're like, oh, do I have to do this again? And it's like, but then you get into a process of doing it. And for me, it's like really just kind of emptying my thoughts, emptying my mind out of like, because when you wake up, you are consumed. Like before my alarm went off this morning, the last word that my brain had, I had this dream. It was like and I said, this child asked me a question about this word called trunculate, and I was explaining to him what trunculate means. The truncate, no, truncated. Is it truncated? I can't remember. Truncated, sorry, truncated, not trunculate. Truncated, yeah. I was explaining to him what truncated meant, and then my alarm went off, and I was like, I'm in the middle of teaching the child, the good child, something. Yeah, why are you waking me up? Like, so then, but when I sat down, I started writing. I was like, truncated. It's just the first thing that came to my head, and I was like, writing. I don't know where it came from. Kind of do, but it's on the news, and then nobody understood what truncated meant. I think it was Gogglebox or something. It's like last week Friday. When I traced it back, I was like, and then I had a conversation. I was listening to my podcast this week, and somebody said, Black history is that it has been truncated, and I heard it again, and I was like, oh my god, so truncated actually just coming up in the psyche, and then now it's in my dream, and now it's in the write it all out, get it all out of you, and then I'm trying to embark upon that's my form of meditation, by the way. I really try to meditate. My brain is too fast. It just says all of this, like all of this silence and stopping. It's long, but I meditate the best when I'm writing, and which you'll probably notice from my Instagram posts and the kind of way that I put things out. But with regards to yoga, I'm really trying to invest in doing that as a practice and really understanding the body that way. So I'm trying to incorporate that into my morning routine, but I have to do things slowly because I have a process of trying to do everything in one time and then failing and then it being a problem because then I go into a negative spiral and it's long. So
I can resonate with that. I'm like, oh, I want to do it. My biggest problem, I think, in my life is I want to do everything. I want to experience everything. So, and then when I can't do one of those things, I get really angry at myself and I beat myself up.
And there we go.
Oh, we're all the same then.
It
sounds very familiar. Yeah, try and do everything. I want to do everything now.
Do everything now and do everything greatly, but everything takes time. And one thing I really learned is that ready is better than rushed. And that's something that that's the kind of meditation I've been sitting on for like a long time. And things take time. Things don't have to be done straight away. And I think we live in a very fast culture and a very fast understanding. I think Juno Diaz says the culture wants us to do everything quickly, but the art wants us to do everything slowly. Listen to the art. And I was just like, that is it. That is literally it. Like, we have to take our time with things. We have to do what we need to do and do it over time, because ultimately I think we're rushing ourselves into like an early grave, to be perfectly honest. Men in particular, not taking the time to have these kind of conversations, to really be considerate people, like not enough men are out here protecting women in the way that you're protecting disadvantaged or less advantaged people who don't benefit from male privilege. Not doing enough at all. And it's just like, it's this whole idea of that we've got to be doing everything and one thing at one time, and then everything's going to have to go over. But we can't beat ourselves up for that. We need to really be able to kind of get to grips with what we want to support and how we want to support it. Then we need to really and then start to learn and take time to understand and know what's going on, and then take action. Whereas men is just very much about action based, solution based, and it's not even taking stock. I mean, I listened to it was a conversation. I think it was Brene Brown. Was it Brene Brown that said something? Might have been, but it was something like about do you want sympathy? Do you want empathy, or do you want a solution? Which one's, like, when someone presents a problem to you, and a lot of men try to go straight to the solution. They try to go straight to the fixing, this is what needs to be done sort of thing. When some people might not even need the solution, they might already know. It's just about having somebody that is there and able to connect with you and have that kind of connection. And I just think it personally just takes a bit of consideration, takes a bit of time. It just needs to things just need to slow down a bit. In this age of social media where everything is fast, when people are looking for fast growth and everything is numbers and everything is returns and everything is all that stuff, things just, when we slow down on things, I think we'll get places faster, ironically.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment to end on, actually. It's just, yeah. Man, it's been a wonderful, beautiful conversation of flow and discussion, and
yeah, I love it, man. I feel so
really
like comfortable in my hardback chair. I need to get a new chair. I need to get a new chair. Like, I can't even sit back on it. It's just doesn't help me. But it's been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed this.
A beautiful conversation. Where can our listeners find out about you and your work and what you're up to?
If you go to alexholmes.co, because we're trying to decolonize the .uk, we don't need the .uk. I'm trying to .co, and then that's it. Go to alexholmes.co, and you will find me and everything I do, the things I've written, information about my podcast, where you can find me on Instagram, where you can find me on Vero, which is a really cool platform. It doesn't have any algorithms. It's for cultural nerds who like me, who like books, and people that like films, and people that like things, like things that are just for the sake of liking them, and not necessarily having to build up any sort of don't get lost in the algorithm jargon and all that stuff. So yeah, that's where you'll find me. My podcast is everywhere. It's Time to Talk with Alex Holmes. Look out for my book. It's coming out next year. Woo. I don't know what else. Like, find me. Just go to my Instagram at by Alex Holmes, and things will lead you places.
I think the only thing you missed was your home address, and that was about it.
Okay, so 745.
If you need to look me up,
look me up. Don't want to wake up with some people like, you know what? I watched Misery the other day, and I don't know. Have you seen Misery? Have you read Misery?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay, all right.
What's Misery?
It'll be a joy when you guys sit down to watch that film. Go and watch it. Stephen King film.
Oh, okay.
Called Misery.
Oh, wow.
Is it a
Okay.
horror movie?
As a writer, it's really triggering. But yes,
Okay.
I don't really watch horror movies, you know. I
it's
like
not.
to sleep.
It's a thriller.
I like thrillers.
Thrillers are
My,
fine.
my
Yeah.
fiance doesn't like them though, so we don't
Still
tend to
quite
watch them
scary.
at all.
Still
Yeah.
quite
It's
scary.
still quite scary.
I know. I get scared at. I get scared at a lot of things. Like, I mean, like it's just the body just does what the body does. If I have to jump, I jump. If I have to scream, I scream. Like, So, but yes, thank you guys for this conversation. It's been beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. It's been wonderful. It's been beautiful to speak to a man that shares our sentiment around the world and also has such an open mind. And I recommend Alex's podcast. It's one of the few podcasts I still listen to very regularly. I download and I listen to it. He has incredible guests and he has a wonderful, easy and calm way as well of delving into difficult conversations and difficult topics. So I highly recommend it. And listeners, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. Let us know if you enjoyed, get in contact and all that good jazz. And hopefully we'll be back next week. So yeah, what an episode. We said it was a really beautiful, wholehearted episode by three men. And I think it's really beautiful to sit down with other men and have these sorts of conversations. Like we've had listeners contact us before in the past and said, like they love listening to our podcast because it's the sort of conversations they'd like to be having with the men that they know. And I feel really blessed to know men like Alex who really are up to the game of really making a difference in the world, but also is like doing his very best in himself to be more connected, to be more feeling to himself and the world around him.
Yeah, I definitely, had that strong sense about Alex, the way he spoke. And I love the vulnerability with which he brings to his own experiences and just sharing that so that others can learn. Really switched on. And hopefully, we can have him on the podcast again. I think we could talk. He's another one where we could just keep on talking. Conversation keeps flowing. So hopefully, another great guest.
Yeah, really wonderful guest. It's funny, I had this real visions actually when we were recording. Is like, wouldn't it be beautiful to bring like five men together and just like on Zoom, just really now where we're not really meeting, like on Zoom and with an audience, and we just have conversation. Have a few questions. Conversation comes up, and everyone just tackles it from their own viewpoint. Because I think at this time in our lives now, if you're listening to this close to when it was brought out, like, coming together as men is something that maybe you're not really experiencing. It's not really happening for you in your life, and having honest and open conversation. But yeah, I think that's something that could be really beautiful for the future. So if you're listening to this and you would really love that, then send us 100 messages and we'll make it happen.
Yeah. Send us £100 and we'll make it happen. Yeah, no, that's a wonder. It is a great idea, and actually, I think it's been coming to me as well. I know you've mentioned it. We talk about it, and I think now is a good time, to really put something together and open up the floor to these sort of conversations between men, and have men lead the way and lead the conversations as well.
Yeah. So, what was I going to say? Obviously, if you want to get in contact with us, our email address is hello@authenticdatingseries.com. And our Instagram, which is usually the best place to get us, is @authenticdatingseries. So yeah, if you have any questions or any thoughts or you need any help with anything, feel free to reach out to us. We don't buy it unless that's part of your request and you make good payment for that. And you can go for our OnlyFans page for that sort of action.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's the best place to get us. And yeah, feel free to reach out because we're always looking for kind of new and fresh topics, but also, to touch space with our listeners. So yeah, I think that is I think that's enough for this episode. And also, I always forget this one is like, if you're on a podcast platform like iTunes or something, please rate, review, because it helps more people find our podcasts. And also feel free to pass this on to a friend or a family member who you think will benefit from this, or even just learn something new. And please do share across Instagram or anything like that. So yeah, until next week, we'll say ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.